Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to the generous and kind sponsors. It is really, really appreciated what you do. Today we'll talk about a combination of a real and fictitious ship. Since we have started with Pirates of the Caribbean, might as well do another one. And I actually do enjoy them, I have to admit. I would rather not be publicly quoted for this. And if you ever quote me, I will deny with my last breath that I have ever said such a thing, but I have found them to be fun to watch. This time we'll talk about Queen Anne's Revenge. I probably am minority here, but this is, if not the favorite of the films for me, it is one of the favorite. Close call between this one and the first of the series. The others were definitely weaker, in my opinion. That's neither here nor there. Let's go back to the ship. The inspiration for Queen Anne's Revenge, as she shows up in the film, is actually Vasa. And it took the rigor for the films to seeing the model that was supposed to be towed at sea and sort of being constructed in the building facility. And so he said, what are you doing? He was told not to worry, that this is based on a real ship. He says, yes. And I know what happened to the real ship. The question is whether you guys know what happened to it. Namely, capsized 1,200 meters into its maiden voyage. But if you look carefully at the stern of the film hero, Queen Anne's Revenge, tall, narrow, it has exactly the same characteristics as Vasa. The only difference between the two vessels is, of course, in the details of the decoration. But otherwise, constructionally, the film Queen Anne's Revenge is, not copied perhaps, but is certainly inspired by Vasa herself. And as such, should be my favorite among the vessels. Though they have spoiled it a little bit, but that's besides the point. Now, the reason that I said all of us, of course, are aware of Blackbeard. I'm a bit at a loss why he has become the most popular of the pirates, when there were others that were far more successful than him, far more interesting characters. I think that it is partially the aura that he himself was creating around his name. The unkempt wild beard, his huge stature, the slow match burning in his beard and around his head during battle. I think that these were part of the legend that he was creating, and in an attempt to create a horrifying image of himself. And I think that this is what really attracts people to this character to the present day. Or maybe his final battle with Mallory, in which he died after suffering more than 14 wounds. Otherwise, I really don't see. There were so many much more interesting, much more successful pirates. It's enough to mention Bartholomew Roberts. Of all the pirate chiefs, he was by far the most successful. He accumulated the largest treasures. He was the widest roaming. He was active for more than 4 years, while most of the others usually were 2 to 3 years before went belly up. And he died in a far more inspirational way in battle against Captain Ogo. And actually, a ship that he possessed for 24 hours is one of the very few pirate ships that are known where they are, the wrecks of which are known. It is in Port Royal, Jamaica. Actually, it is right across from Port Royal, but it is in that harbor. And as far as I'm aware, it has never been excavated. It was the last ship that he ever captured. Ogo brought it there after the battle. Anyway, the point that I'm making is that personally, if I'm going to be creating novels or films about a pirate, I would have chosen Blackbeard, Bartholomew Roberts, because of his success, because of his dandy-like elegance and class. I believe that he was the inspiration for Sir Matthew Barrie's Captain Hook in Peter Pan, because of the style of dressing, because of the strong desire of Captain Hook to be upper class, something that was characteristic of Bard. Blackbeard, Edward Teach, was just a brute, not particularly bright, not particularly successful. He never accumulated any humongous riches, but he did hold an American port town hostage for a while. He died in somewhat entertaining circumstances. He was renowned for his penchant for much younger wives. And that must be part of the attraction of the legend of Blackbeard. By all means, comment down below and let me know what you think, why he is always the one that everybody on the street knows, and far better and more successful pirates are virtually unknown. Mind-boggling, to me at least. Returning to the ships, however, if we do have the film version, which is complete invention, the Queen Anne's Revenge, unlike Black Pearl, unlike the Flying Dutchman, was a Rio ship. Or at least there was a ship, a Rio ship, that was named Queen Anne's Revenge after it became Teach's flagship. The Rio vessel was a French-built privateersman from the period of the Spanish Succession War. By the time she was launched, privateering was winning out. The war was winding down after nearly 15 years of fighting. So the French ship La Concorde from Nantes in France was converted and sent to the triangular trade, Atlantic trade. That meant from Europe to the slave coast, Central Africa, the West Shore. Loaded slaves crossed the Atlantic, sold the slaves, loaded molasses and other local products, shipped them back to Europe. Rinse and repeat. The exercise was the normal transaction of the ship. On its third round-trip voyage, so she was fairly new at the time, on the third voyage, while approaching the Caribbean islands, she was intercepted and captured, mostly because of high sickness among the crew, something typical for the slave trade. She was successfully captured by a few sloops, and specifically by Teach. Teach, aka Blackbeard, converted her into his flagship. Since she was built for privateering, she must have been a fast and maneuverable vessel. She was fairly heavily armed for a merchant vessel, which also was a necessity for this trade at the end of the war. But he added significant numbers of guns, probably small and mixed armament, to both the main deck and to the quarterdeck and the forecastle. So eventually, allegedly by eyewitnesses who reported on the vessel, she carried up to 40 guns. That could not have done miracles for her sailing qualities, it must be said. Another point to make is that Teach freed the French crew and officers captured and went as far as giving them one of his sloops to make their way back. Often in popular thought, pirates are seen as these characters fighting for equality and freedom, and the place where you can expect Africans also to be free and happy. To buzz this particular balloon, let's point out that the pirates actually sold the captured slaves into slavery. Did not free them, did not join them with them, sold them. That was much more often the case. From there, they made their way into North America, and in Ocracoke Sound, the story goes that Teach withdrew his squadron, consisting at the time of two sloops plus Queen Anne's Revenge, and allegedly he misled the crew into thinking that it is time to careen the ship, laid her up on the careen, then somehow managed to wreck the Adventure sloop into her and lose both ships and essentially split up his company. It has long been accepted historical fact that he did sink the Queen Anne's Revenge and the sloop quite intentionally to split up his crew, which had risen to about 500. And with the third sloop and the lion's pie of the booty that he had accumulated during his years of cruising, he sailed north until eventually he was intercepted by a lieutenant of the Royal Navy, who was sent to chase him and died in battle. A vessel was discovered in the 1990s by, let's be polite and call them a salvaging company. And what was different from most treasure hunting companies and this one was that they were proposing to do a proper archaeological excavation and were hoping to recuperate the costs of the operation from tickets sold to the public or the museum, gift shops, film rides, story rides, etc. They carried, to the best of my memory, they carried out 2 archaeological seasons. At least I have seen reports for only 2 archaeological seasons. They found out that significant portions of the hull are surviving in rather good condition. A variety of guns of different calibers and different manufacture and different origin were discovered during the wrecks. A conservation laboratory was constructed, the material was properly treated, and from there onwards I don't really have many facts. I do hear rumors of what happened, so no sense in repeating them. To make the long story short, unfortunately this project was not continued after, I think 1997 was the last season of excavation. There are a few articles published on the site. It is a tragedy that this was not completed because it would have been extremely interesting. A non-slaver, his interesting historical background, built at a time when French shipbuilding had already accumulated high reputation. So it would have been very, very interesting to see the details of this vessel. Most unfortunately, we're unlikely to see it in our lifetimes. There have been 2 controversies, of course. Not everybody immediately recognized or accepted the identification of the site as the Queen Anne's Revenge. Some colleagues from Eastern Carolina University published an article in the IGN, in the International Journal for Nautical Archaeology, which I give as required reading to my students, questioning the identity. And they made some very good points. First of all, the depth at which the ship is sunk. It is deeper than you would expect it to be had she been on the careen. And historical records, the eyewitness accounts say that she was careening when she was lost. If she was there, then there ought to be a second wreck somewhere in the immediate vicinity, the sloop Adventure, but no other wreck has been found around it. So, what's the deal? They were arguing that this suggests that we should, at the very least, question the identity and not take it for granted. The response was carried out by a professional archaeologist who worked with this company and was in charge of documenting parts of the wreck. And he made equally good case for this being the Queen Anne's Revenge. He pointed out that no one has really done extensive search for the sloop, so she may still be somewhere there around nearby. That, yeah, she is in deeper water than you would expect her to be, but that also makes sense because in very shallow water she wouldn't sink. She would just hit the ground and can be refloated. And on the arguments moved. What is my personal opinion, and I'm speaking only based on publications, on images. They have a rather good website that shows much of the archaeological material discovered. I see here the first mate and master shipwright here has come to keep me company and to remind me that I am talking way too long already. Point taken, Imbir. We will be bringing this one to a close. So, from what I have seen of the material culture, of the published material, I am willing to believe that this may indeed be the Queen Anne's Revenge. Mr. Moore, the archaeologist, persuades me. As far as other details of this ship, needless to say, I have seen at least 2 or 3 models built of her. These models have nothing to do with La Concorde. They are showing similarly sized vessels, but they are not showing La Concorde. One of these models I actually saw with bowsprit and jib boom and staysails, but from contemporary French depictions of small frigates of this period, which is what La Concorde was, they still were carrying the spritsail topsail mast. They do not really disappear until the 1720s. And on very large ships, they're kept even later than this. So, can there be a reasonable model of Queen Anne's Revenge? Yes, possibly, maybe, conceivably, if somebody actually finishes excavating the shipwreck. It boils down to this. And I hope that somebody does. Ideally, before I have reached the senile stage where I can no longer read and understand what I have read, for I'm really curious what else they're going to find out there. That construction is absolutely fascinating. Proper documentation would allow us to reverse engineer the design process of French ships in this period, and that will be fantastic comparative material for the design process that Taras Pevny proposed in his interpretation of the remains of the bark La Belle. So with this, ladies and gentlemen, a particularly impatient cat who is asking for his dinner is telling me that it is time to finish recording. And I believe his owner agrees. So, without further ado, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for bearing up with me. I'm truly grateful to the sponsors. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.